I never imagined a Saturday morning could descend into such a nightmare, that the quiet hum of hospital monitors would be shattered by the screech of entitlement and rage. The emergency wing smelled sterile, indifferent, while outside, life went on as usual. But inside my father's room, chaos erupted in a way that would haunt me forever. Karen, the woman whose name had become synonymous with manipulation and fear in our neighborhood, was striding toward Dad's bedside with that smug, suffocating confidence that always made my skin crawl. Her bulk and brazen attitude filled the hallway. Her eyes glinted with a sense of ownership over a life that was nothing but my father's. I froze for half a second, thinking someone must stop her, and that half second stretched impossibly long as she reached the terminal that kept him breathing. In a surreal mixture of disbelief and fury, I lunged forward, but Karen was faster than I expected. Her hand hovered over the plug, her expression twisted with the deluded belief that she had a right to control outcomes that were not hers to decide. My pulse hammered in my ears, the beeping of monitors syncing with my panic. "Stop!" I screamed, voice cracking under adrenaline. But she ignored me, her arrogance thicker than the plastic gloves she wore. In that terrifying instant, I realized that preparation, instinct, and quick thinking were my only weapons. I fumbled for the emergency button by the bedside nurse station and slammed it with every ounce of strength, praying someone would respond before she did something irreversible. Within moments, hospital security appeared, alerted by the shrill alarms I had triggered. Karen's confident stance faltered. She hadn't counted on real consequences, on real authority that wouldn't bend to her whims. But she wasn't going down quietly. She spun, shouting accusations, her voice echoing like nails on a chalkboard, claims about negligence, entitlement, her supposed moral duty, but security, trained and unflinching, ushered her away. My legs trembled, my hands shook. My father's monitors were steady, the rhythmic beep a reassuring pulse amidst the storm. A wave of emotions crashed over relief, rage, helplessness, and the stark clarity of how close we had come to catastrophe. The twist came as the hospital called the police to file a formal complaint. As Karen was escorted out, her resistance dissolved under the weight of authority and legal accountability. What shocked me most wasn't just the rapid response, but the revelation that one of the officers had grown up in our neighborhood, knew Karen's pattern of harassment and manipulation, and immediately connected the dots between her history and her latest atrocity. Officer Ramirez, quiet but resolute, provided testimony that made Karen's behavior undeniable. Her attempts to rewrite the story, to claim concern for family welfare, crumbled against documented incidents, surveillance footage, and eyewitness accounts. Her lies and intimidation tactics, so effective on neighborhood lawns and HOA meetings, were worthless in the glare of legal scrutiny and moral clarity. Even more startling was what we discovered after her arrest. Karen had attempted similar intrusions in other households, using pretexts of moral authority, emergency intervention, and fabricated concerns. The pattern was chilling, but it provided a roadmap for justice. I worked with authorities, compiling evidence, photographs, text messages, and prior complaints to create an airtight case. The investigation exposed the full extent of her entitlement and maliciousness, her HOA influence, the falsified claims, the intimidation tactics, and it became clear that Karen's grip on power was rooted in fear and manipulation, not legitimacy. Meanwhile, my father's condition remained stable. The medical team reassured me that the immediate threat was over, that the machine was uninterrupted, and that, most importantly, we had caught Karen in the act. My mother held my hand, tears mingling with relief and exhaustion. The legal implications were just beginning, but the emotional victory was immediate. Justice had a face in that moment, the face of law enforcement and vigilant family members acting with courage and clarity against unchecked power. Across town, news of Karen's arrest spread rapidly. The neighborhood whispered, neighbors called to confirm, and the fear she had cultivated for years began to crumble. Her reputation as an enforcer, a self-appointed arbiter of morality and control, shattered in hours. People who had once been cowed by her presence felt emboldened, relieved that the nightmare figure of their community had been checked. For the first time in years, residents dared to voice concerns, attend HOA meetings, and reclaim authority over their own lives without trembling at her looming shadow. This story was more than about one morning, one act of recklessness, one life nearly lost. It was about the dangerous cocktail of entitlement, unchecked authority, and delusion that could flourish in quiet corners of communities. Karen had thrived on intimidation, on manipulating rules, and exploiting fear, but in that sterile hospital room, surrounded by monitors, alarms, and law enforcement, her power evaporated. It became painfully clear that no one, not even the most aggressive HOA president, could override law, ethics, and the determined intervention of those who knew when and how to act. I learned lessons that day that I carry to this moment. Vigilance matters, documentation matters, intervention matters, and, above all, moral clarity matters. The line between life and death, chaos and safety, fear and empowerment can be razor thin. And while Karen had attempted to cross it, she was stopped by preparation, courage, and the unwavering support of those who refused to be cowed. Even now, every glance at Dad's stable monitors, every interaction with neighbors emboldened by the morning's events, every reminder of the resilience that justice can foster, reinforces a simple truth. Power unchecked is dangerous, but courage, clarity, and legal authority can protect what is sacred. Karen's collapse was both satisfying and sobering, a bitter lesson for her, a profound reassurance for all who witnessed it. The narrative of entitlement met the reality of accountability, and the consequences were swift, stark, and necessary. What do you think? Was the police intervention too harsh, or was it the only way to ensure a life was preserved and justice served? Share your thoughts and debate right versus wrong, because understanding these boundaries is how communities safeguard their most vulnerable. The aftermath of that morning unfolded like a slow-burning storm. Karen was confined to the local precinct, her overconfidence crushed beneath the weight of evidence and law. She had assumed her position within the HOA, her perceived authority in the neighborhood, would protect her from consequences, but the reality of legal accountability struck swiftly. Reports circulated, social media buzzed, and neighbors once intimidated by her domineering presence began to speak openly. I watched from the hospital hallway as her empire of fear collapsed in real time, and a sense of cathartic relief swept through the community. But the battle wasn't entirely over. Karen's allies tried to spin her actions as misunderstood concern, claiming she acted out of moral duty and protective instincts. Some whispered that she had friends in high places, that the HOA network could shield her from consequences. Yet, for every rumor, there was a counterweight. Neighbors came forward, testimonies were shared, and the pattern of her manipulations was undeniable. The very people she had tried to silence became witnesses to the truth, unified by a shared sense of justice. Her influence, once pervasive, was replaced by scrutiny, and the community's renewed courage ensured no room for intimidation remained. Unexpectedly, a twist came from within the law enforcement ranks. Officer Ramirez, the childhood acquaintance who had recognized Karen's behavioral patterns, discovered that Karen had been planning more than just a single intrusion into someone else's life. Hidden in her personal files, there were notes on neighbors' schedules, children's routines, and potential interventions she had intended to execute. The implications were chilling. Her entitlement wasn't merely a product of the HOA. It was a systemic, premeditated threat. This revelation galvanized the police department and prosecutors to move decisively, ensuring that Karen faced not only immediate charges, but the full scope of her manipulative and threatening behavior. The twist intensified the stakes, illustrating how close we had come to a multifaceted crisis and how fortunate we were that preparedness and vigilance intervened. Meanwhile, I remained at my father's side, watching him stabilize and recover with remarkable resilience. The medical team emphasized that timely intervention had prevented irreversible damage. Every monitor beep, every rhythmic pulse, became a symbol of triumph not just over a medical crisis, but over the calculated audacity of a person whose disregard for others' lives had nearly turned tragedy into reality. My mother and I embraced quietly, a shared understanding passing between us. Life, fragile as it was, could be fiercely protected when allies, law, and community converged. The broader impact of Karen's downfall rippled through the neighborhood. Residents who had once bowed to her authority began attending HOA meetings with renewed confidence, insisting on transparency, accountability, and clear boundaries. The HOA, stripped of Karen's manipulative leadership, underwent a restructuring that prioritized fairness and community welfare over coercion. Rules that had been twisted for personal gain were revised, and a sense of safety returned. Children could play freely, families could communicate without fear, and the culture of intimidation that Karen had fostered began to dissipate, replaced by dialogue, mutual respect, and a shared commitment to justice. Karen's legal proceedings became a cautionary tale. Her actions were documented in court, with surveillance footage, eyewitness accounts, and the officer's testimony forming an airtight case. She attempted feeble defenses, claims of concern, moral authority, even fabricated threats to justify her interference, but none held. The judge, recognizing the pattern of behavior and the potential for real harm, ruled decisively. Karen faced charges that encompassed attempted interference with life-saving medical equipment, harassment, and endangerment of a minor and vulnerable adult. The ruling sent a clear message. Entitlement and intimidation, no matter how deeply ingrained, have limits, and the law will act swiftly to protect the innocent. Through the ordeal, I learned the true meaning of courage and community. Action isn't defined solely by grand gestures. It is found in the small, decisive choices made in moments of intense pressure. The choice to hit the emergency button, to document her actions, to stay calm and coordinate with authorities, these were acts of courage that had tangible, life-saving consequences. And equally important was the collective courage of the neighbors and law enforcement who refused to allow fear and manipulation to dictate outcomes. Together, we transformed a terrifying episode into a profound lesson on vigilance, accountability, and moral clarity. As weeks turned into months, life slowly regained its rhythm. My father's health stabilized further, the neighborhood embraced transparency, and Karen became a figure of cautionary legend rather than authority. Families shared stories of that morning, emphasizing the critical role of preparedness and community collaboration. The teenager who had initially witnessed some of Karen's previous schemes was reassured, counseled, and empowered, learning that the right actions, though sometimes difficult, can protect the most vulnerable. Maya and Jaden, whose guidance and intervention had been pivotal, quietly reinforced the notion that expertise, preparedness, and ethical action could tip the scales toward justice, even against the most audacious attempts at control. Reflecting on the ordeal, I realized the morning had been a crucible that tested not only our nerves, but our principles. Karen's collapse was bitter and satisfying, yes, but it was also a powerful affirmation of what happens when communities act decisively, guided by law, ethics, and shared responsibility. Entitlement and intimidation are ephemeral when confronted by collective clarity and moral courage. The narrative that had once been dominated by fear was rewritten through evidence, strategy, and accountability. Even now, the lessons echo in the quiet moments. Always document threats, always act decisively within legal bounds, and never underestimate the power of community vigilance. Life, delicate and irreplaceable, can be fiercely protected when fear is met with courage and arrogance meets accountability. Karen's reign of intimidation ended that morning, but the principles she violated, trust, respect, ethical responsibility, remain enshrined in the community's renewed approach to governance, vigilance, and empathy. And so, the story concludes not merely with the arrest of an overbearing HOA president, but with the restoration of safety, respect, and moral order. Every monitor beep in my father's room, every neighbor attending a meeting without fear, every child playing freely in the yard, becomes a testament to the power of preparation, decisive action, and unwavering commitment to justice. Karen's downfall was swift, necessary, and illuminating, reinforcing the profound truth that courage, clarity, and ethical action are the strongest defenses against recklessness and entitlement. Do you think Karen's arrest and the swift legal intervention were the correct outcome, or could there have been an alternative path? Share your thoughts and weigh the boundaries of right versus wrong, because these moments teach us how courage and accountability shape communities and safeguard lives.